My name's Lauren, I'm 24 now, and up until last year I was living under the tight financial grip of my parents. My birthday should have been something joyful, but instead it turned into the night they sent me away with just 2 suitcases. As I stood there frozen, tears running down my face, my father looked me straight in the eye and said, "You've become too dependent on us." What they didn't realize was that their so-called perfect daughter had picked up a few skills, ones that would give me control over my own future, and quietly closed their access to mine. And what happened next forced them to rethink who really held the power. Before I explain how that birthday meltdown triggered a financial shift in their world, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe if you're ready for a story of growth, grit, and a little poetic justice. Growing up in our big suburban home, I never lacked material things. My mom, Denise, made sure we looked like the picture-perfect family, designer outfits, pristine holiday photos, the whole package. My dad, Malcolm, ran his own financial advising firm and provided well, but he used money like invisible handcuffs. On the outside, our house looked like something from a magazine, but inside it felt as cold as a showroom. Even when I was little, nothing I did seemed to meet my mom's standards. A B+ was treated like a disaster when what she expected were straight A's. "Why can't you just try harder?" became her go-to phrase, always delivered with that disapproving sigh I grew to dread. My handmade art projects? She called them messy. My friends? Questionable. My clothes? Embarrassing. Denise had been both homecoming queen and valedictorian, titles she never let me forget, especially when I fell short. Dad had a different style of control, but it was just as damaging. He rarely criticized directly. Instead, he used money to keep everything in check. "If I'm paying the bills, you follow my rules," he'd say anytime I voiced a different opinion. When I asked to join the school photography club, he reminded me how expensive cameras were, and that my grades didn't exactly earn me that kind of luxury. Everything came with conditions. To the outside world, their marriage looked polished and stable, but behind closed doors, I often heard quiet arguments. They stayed together not out of love, but for status and financial ease. Mom managed appearances and social events, while Dad controlled the finances, and somewhere in between, their silent tug-of-war played out through me. My academic achievements didn't feel like my own, they felt like family trophies. When I got accepted into the Ashwood University with a partial scholarship, Dad took full credit. "At least our sacrifices paid off," he said at the dinner I'd hoped would be a celebration. The scholarship didn't cover all my expenses, which gave them the control they seemed to crave. They insisted on setting up joint accounts to help manage things, but it was really about tracking every cent I spent. True independence felt out of reach. During the summer after sophomore year, I tried to move into an apartment with a few friends. I was working extra hours at a coffee shop near campus, trying to save for the deposit. But when Malcolm noticed my savings activity, he contacted the landlord directly and canceled my lease application, claiming I wasn't responsible enough financially. I was 20 years old. The worst part? Their constant dismissal of my passion. Graphic design, according to Malcolm, wasn't a valid career. "Artists don't make money," he'd remind me during our monthly budget reviews, where he'd dissect my spending on design software and supplies. Denise would chime in too, suggesting I follow in the footsteps of my cousin, Chloe, who already had a job lined up at a top firm. Eventually, I started hiding things out of necessity. My manager agreed to pay part of my wages in cash, which I tucked away in a lockbox under my dorm bed. My best friend Brianna became the only person who truly knew how desperate I was to get out. She noticed how I'd tense up when my mom called, and how my voice would suddenly turn unnaturally cheerful during those conversations. Things got worse during my senior year, just 2 months before graduation. Over Sunday dinner, Malcolm gave me an ultimatum: switch my major to business or finance, or lose their support entirely. "4 years is enough time wasted on doodling," he said, calmly slicing his steak. "It's time you grew up." Denise nodded in agreement. "We just want the best for you, honey. This graphic design phase has lasted long enough." I sat there stunned, fork still halfway to my mouth. "I'm nearly done with my final portfolio," I said. "I can't change majors now." "Well," Malcolm replied, as if it were a minor thing, "then you'll need to figure out how to cover that last semester on your own." From that point on, things got even more tense. Denise's remarks became sharper, nitpicking everything from my unpolished hair, not interview ready, she'd say, to Brianna's ambitions or lack thereof. Malcolm started watching my bank activity more closely than ever. A simple $6 coffee could spark a full-on interrogation. Our home turned into a walking maze, with every conversation ready to trip me up. I could feel the emotional weight growing heavier each day. Brianna noticed how much I changed. I looked tired, I barely smiled, and I was losing weight. You're always drained, Lori, she told me one afternoon at the library, one of the few places where I felt at peace. I'm honestly worried about you. I started pushing back in small ways. Sometimes I stayed out later than their curfew. Other nights I simply turned my phone off for a few hours. I began applying for graphic design internships in secret. Each little act of defiance felt scary but also strangely freeing. As my 24nd birthday got closer, the tension at home became harder to ignore. I'd never been one to make a big deal about birthdays, mostly because they always ended in disappointment, but this one felt different. It was the age where I'd finally graduate. The age I'd finally leave. One morning over breakfast, I casually mentioned that Brianna wanted to take me out to dinner for my birthday. My parents shared a look I couldn't quite interpret. We should discuss your plans, Malcolm said, his tone setting off internal alarms, but he left for work without explaining further, leaving me uneasy the entire day. That evening, I got a text from Brianna. Your mom called asking weird questions about your birthday plans. Something's off. Call me. I picked up a small chocolate cupcake and a single candle from the campus bakery, a quiet little celebration just in case. When I got home, I overheard my parents in the middle of an argument about the situation and whatever decision they'd come to. Their voices stopped the moment they heard my keys at the door. Even with all the red flags, I clung to a small bit of hope. Maybe they were reconsidering their stance. Maybe my birthday would open the door for reconciliation. I spent the night before my birthday at the library, finishing assignments and avoiding the tension hanging over the house. When I got back, my parents were sitting in silence watching TV. They barely acknowledged me. I went to bed with a strange mix of anxiety and hope, not knowing everything was about to change. I woke up on my birthday with sunlight pouring through the curtains, briefly forgetting the tension that had been building for weeks. For a moment, I let myself believe today might be different. Maybe my birthday would shift something, remind them that behind my resistance and their expectations was still their daughter. A person worthy of love no matter what major I chose. Downstairs, my parents moved through their usual routine. My mom sipped black coffee while scrolling through her tablet, and my dad spread butter on his toast with robotic focus. Neither of them looked up when I walked in. Good morning, I said, my voice coming out smaller than I expected. My mom glanced up for a second, then returned to her tablet. My dad kept reading the financial section of the newspaper. Neither acted like today was anything special. I poured myself some coffee, the silence heavy around me. After a few minutes, I couldn't take it. So, it's my birthday today, I said, trying to sound casual. We're aware of the date, Lauren, my mom replied. Eyes still on her screen. I finished my breakfast quickly and headed to campus, blinking back tears. Throughout the day, friends sent birthday texts that lit up my screen. Brianna sent a cupcake gif, Mason from class wrote, Happy birthday, design genius, and even my old roommate from sophomore year reached out, though we hadn't talked in a while, but nothing from my parents. During my design class, Professor Hawthorne noticed something was off. Everything all right, Lauren? She asked after class as the others packed up. Just a lot on my mind, I said, gathering my things. She leaned against her desk. Your portfolio's really strong. You've got real talent. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Her words hit something soft inside me. Thank you, I said quickly, slipping out before the tears could show. Brianna treated me to lunch at our favorite sandwich shop and gave me a handmade bracelet, braided in my favorite colors, for my best friend. She said as she tied it around my wrist. May this year bring you all the freedom you deserve. By late afternoon, a deep sense of dread settled in as I drove home. A part of me wanted to keep driving past our house and keep going until I landed somewhere no one expected anything from me, but I turned into the driveway. Both of my parents' cars were already there, unusual for a weekday. The moment I stepped inside, I sensed something was off. My parents sat in the living room with stiff postures, more like they were preparing for a formal meeting than greeting their daughter on her birthday. My mom had on her serious conversation face, lips pressed thin. My dad had placed his financial folder on the coffee table. Sit down, Lauren, Malcolm said, gesturing to the chair across from them. I sat at the edge of the seat, my handbag still over my shoulder. Your mother and I have been reviewing the household finances, he said, diving right in as he opened the folder to reveal what looked like my bank statements. Your expenses have become unsustainable. My expenses? I asked, more confused than anxious in that moment. I'd been careful, staying within the budget they set, sometimes even skipping meals to make it work. It's not just the money, Denise said, stepping in. Though that's certainly part of it. It's your repeated poor life choices. Like what? I asked, genuinely confused. This graphic design nonsense for one, Malcolm replied, his tone dismissive. We've been patient, letting you play around with this creative phase. But patience has limits. It's not a phase, I said, my frustration rising. It's a career. And I'm good at it. Professor Hawthorne says I have real talent. Professor Hawthorne isn't the one paying your tuition, my father snapped. Or buying your groceries, my mother added. The discussion quickly escalated, covering all the usual topics. How my career choice wasn't good enough, how I wasn't grateful, how I'd failed to live up to their hopes. But this time, their tone had a finality I hadn't heard before. When I mentioned I'd be financially independent in just 2 months, Malcolm set his hand on the table with a sigh. You've become too dependent on us, he said, trying to stay composed. For 24 years we've carried you, and for what? A daughter who ignores everything we value and throws our support away on a useless degree. I'd heard disappointment before. But this was different. This time they said it with no hesitation, no care to soften the blow. Then Denise spoke, her voice colder than ever. We're done supporting you, Lauren. Completely. What does that mean? I asked, barely getting the words out. It means you need to move out, Malcolm said flatly. Tonight. I blinked, not sure I'd heard that right. Tonight, Denise confirmed. The date doesn't matter. Our decision is final. Malcolm then reached for a printed list. They told me my final month of tuition had been paid. The car insurance? That ended today. My phone would stay on the family plan, but only until the end of the month. That as for my health insurance, that coverage stopped immediately. Every line felt like another door closing in my face, and my thoughts started racing, trying to calculate what this actually meant. No apartment, no insurance, and no money left to cover my last month of school expenses. You can't just do this out of nowhere, I said, my voice rising as panic set in. We absolutely can, Denise replied coolly. You're an adult now, Lauren. It's time you acted like one. We don't think you're ready to handle life on your own yet, Malcolm chimed in, waving a hand like the matter was settled. Not with your lack of practical skills or your inability to manage money. They laid out their terms: leave tonight on your own, or agree to their plans for my education and future. And just like that, the choice was mine. Even though I was terrified, I refused to give up my dreams, not even if it meant facing life with nowhere to stay. I ran upstairs to pack, hands trembling so badly I could barely zip up my suitcase. Tears blurred my eyes as I grabbed the essentials, knowing I had to leave most things behind. So many of my belongings had been gifts from my parents. Gifts that, as I now realized, came with conditions I never agreed to. Malcolm's voice called from downstairs. You've got 45 minutes. Still holding back tears, I called Brianna, my voice shaking. Anything you don't take is no longer yours, he said sharply. I clutched the phone, trying to steady my voice. They asked me to move out unexpectedly. Right now. Can I stay with you? Just for tonight? Of course, she said without hesitation. I'm coming to get you. No time, I whispered. They said I have 45 minutes. I'll drive myself. I threw together 2 suitcases, just clothes, toiletries, and my laptop. My backpack held my art supplies and portfolio. I didn't even touch the family photos. They didn't feel like memories anymore. More like props in a life that wasn't mine. The little chocolate cupcake I'd bought for my birthday sat untouched on the counter. I dragged my bags downstairs, and my parents didn't say a word, just watched like they were witnessing someone else's move out. Key, Malcolm said flatly, holding out his hand with shaking fingers. I unclipped it from my keychain and placed it in his palm. You'll see this was a mistake, Denise said coldly, as I adjusted the weight of my bags. When you're ready to make smart decisions, we'll talk about conditions for coming back. I'm not coming back, I said, and I meant it. Even with tears on my face, my voice held steady. Standing outside with all I had, I heard the deadbolt click shut behind me. The sound landed like a final judgment. Rain began to fall as I loaded my car, soaking my hair and mixing with the tears already on my cheeks. Happy birthday to me. Brianna's place was tiny, barely enough space for her and her roommate Talia, but they welcomed me without hesitation. I collapsed on their sagging couch, suitcases still packed beside me, struggling to process how everything had just shifted. They really didn't give you any warning? Talia asked, handing me a warm cup of tea. I shook my head, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Not even a hint, I whispered. One minute I had a place to live, the next I didn't. Brianna sat beside me and gently wrapped her arm around my shoulder. You're not without a home. You're staying here. For as long as you need. But we all silently understood the truth. Their one-bedroom apartment couldn't house a third person forever. Brianna already slept on a small twin mattress wedged between the wall and Talia's bed. That first night, I lay wide awake on their bumpy couch, staring at the ceiling. My mind spiraled with questions. How would I afford meals? Where would I go when this temporary shelter ended? Would I even be able to finish my degree? And what if I got sick without coverage? At 3 a.m., I checked my banking. My parents had already removed their access from my account. The remaining balance stared back at me. $1,962.45. Everything else had been tied up in the joint account they controlled. Now, it was completely out of reach. When the sun finally rose, I hadn't slept at all. My eyes were raw, my throat felt scratched, and every breath ached in my chest. Brianna found me still awake when she got up for her early class. You didn't sleep? She asked gently, noticing my puffy eyes. I just shook my head. Call the financial aid office first thing, she said, squeezing my hand. They have to have options for emergencies like this. By 9:15 a.m., I was already waiting outside the office, clutching my student ID like it was my lifeline. A counselor I'd never spoken to before, Mrs. Becker, listened to my shaky story with practiced sympathy. I'm really sorry, she said. But your student aid application still lists your parents' income. To be considered an independent student, you'd need proof they've completely stopped supporting you. They have, I insisted. They made me leave last night. I understand, she said kindly, but we need documentation. Either tax forms showing you support yourself, or legal paperwork proving you're financially independent. Without those, I still counted as a dependent under the system. I left her office holding a stack of emergency loan applications, a list of scholarship leads, and info about work-study openings. But none of it solved my immediate problem. No place to stay. No way to pay next month's tuition. I headed straight to my coffee shop job and asked my manager if I could take on more hours. I can give you 12 extra hours, he said after I explained what happened. That's all the budget can stretch right now. 10 more hours at minimum wage wouldn't even cover my textbooks, let alone food or rent. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed nonstop. My dad kept messaging, demanding I return everything he considered family property, including the laptop I'd gotten as a graduation gift and even the suitcases I'd used to leave. My mom? She was busy texting extended family with a whole different version of events. She framed me as the rebellious daughter, painting herself as the misunderstood parent. By the third day, I was running on 3 hours of sleep a night, showering in the campus gym, stashing my luggage back at Brianna's, and somehow still trying to make it to class, even though it felt like my whole world was crumbling. Hawthorne picked up on the change in me right away. Whatever's going on outside of class, it's starting to show in your work, she said after reviewing my latest designs. There's a lack of focus. Talk to me, Lauren. I completely broke down in her office. The entire story came pouring out between sobs, everything I'd been holding in. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she gently offered real support. A connection to the university's Horizon student housing, and a lead on a possible job within the design department. Your talent is worth protecting, she said with certainty. Don't let short-term setbacks throw off your long-term goals. It had been a full week since I'd been forced out of my home and I was hanging on but just barely. The Horizon student housing had a 2-week waiting list. My loan applications were still in progress. And the part-time job I had didn't provide nearly enough hours. That's when a harsh reality started to sink in. I might have to leave school, just 2 months before graduation. Then came another hit. After working back-to-back shifts, I checked my tiny personal bank account, only to find it locked. A message popped up saying the account was under review due to a dispute. Somehow my parents had convinced the bank to freeze it, claiming it was set up incorrectly, even though I was the only name on it. I sat in the campus computer lab, staring at the notification in disbelief. That's when Mason, a classmate from my advanced design course, walked over. He saw the look on my face and asked, "Bank troubles?" He set his laptop down next to mine. My parents froze my last active account, I admitted, too emotionally drained to pretend everything was fine. They forced me out last week, and now they're making sure I don't have access to anything. Mason gave a low whistle. That's seriously messed up. After a beat, he added, my dad did something similar when I came out. He tried to control me through money when everything else stopped working. How did you deal with it? I asked. His smile was dry. Not always by the book, he said. But I did learn a lot about how unprotected people's finances really are. Our conversation shifted toward the loopholes most banks still had. Mason explained that a lot of people reuse the same passwords across multiple platforms, rarely updated their security questions, and often left their recovery systems outdated. People don't realize how fragile their online banking setups can be, he said. Especially older generations, they haven't touched their settings in years. And that's when something clicked in my mind. Years ago, I had helped my parents set up their online banking accounts. They'd never been great with tech. Did they ever update those passwords? Mason asked. Probably not, I admitted. My dad uses the same format for everything: birth year, company name, and an exclamation point. Recovery emails, he prompted. I nodded slowly. Both accounts had been connected to my dad's main email, the one I had set up for him. Just saying, Mason said with a cautious tone, you might still have more access than you think. That evening, I got an email from my father. The subject line read, "Your belongings." The message itself was short and incredibly cold. We've started donating your abandoned items to thrift store. Your childish books and art supplies will be better used by people who appreciate them. Maybe this will teach you about responsibility. My art materials. The books I'd loved since childhood. Even my carefully built portfolio, all of it was being discarded without a second thought. As if none of it mattered. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. If they could erase me from their lives without a second thought, maybe it was time they felt a taste of that disruption themselves. The next day, Mason and I met at a coffee shop off campus, far from any university networks. He brought his laptop. I brought my frustration. Before we began, he paused and made one thing clear. I'm not going to help you do anything illegal, no temporary digital disruption or identity stuff. That crosses a line. I don't want their money, I said honestly. I just want them to experience even a small fraction of the chaos they created for me. That seemed to satisfy him. There's a difference between temporary digital disruption and using access you were already granted. Let's stick to what's legitimate. For the next hour, he walked me through the tools available to consumers. Credit freezes, account security notifications, and extra authentication steps. All of it's real, legal, and designed to prevent misuse, Mason said. The beauty of a credit freeze, he added, is that you're protecting their accounts technically. Just very thoroughly. As we dug deeper, I realized something surprising. Despite how wealthy they liked to appear, my parents actually lived on borrowed time. And borrowed money. My dad didn't own that luxury car, he leased it. My mom's shopping habits? Backed by several credit cards. Their entire lifestyle was built on the illusion of wealth. One that required uninterrupted access to credit. People who try to control others financially often have money issues of their own, Mason observed. They just know how to hide it better. The more I learned, the more I saw how fragile their financial image really was. Everything depended on keeping up appearances on uninterrupted lines of credit. So I went to the Whitmore Academic Library and started researching. What exactly counted as unauthorized access? Where was the line between using credentials I'd helped set up and doing something I legally shouldn't? How far could I go to inconvenience them without crossing any legal boundaries? I wanted maximum disruption without doing anything unlawful. Later that night, I told Brianna about what I'd been looking into. Her face tightened with concern. Lori, I get why you're hurt. I really do. But just be careful. Holding on to resentment keeps the connection alive in a different way. Are you sure that's what you want? Her question made me pause. I didn't want a connection. I wanted them to face consequences. I finally said it. They think they can just discard me without any consequences. Just be careful, Brianna warned. Don't turn into the person they claim you are. I spent the next day preparing carefully. I used university computers instead of my personal laptop. I created a new, secure email address through a privacy-focused provider. I documented how I originally helped my parents set up their online accounts, proof that I had valid access. I also saved messages showing how they withdrew support, including firm texts and emails about shared family assets. A meeting with Mr. Patel at Campus Legal Resource Center confirmed what I had suspected. The way your parents made you leave raises legal questions, he told me. Even in family situations, tenant rights still apply. They should have provided written notice, usually 21 days. It wouldn't get me back into their home, but it affirmed that what happened wasn't entirely lawful. And it gave me more resolve. Through quiet conversations with mutual acquaintances, I learned my parents had told others I'd had a personal crisis and moved out after making unreasonable demands. Their strategy to protect their image by tearing mine down only fueled my determination. With everything in place, I waited for the right moment. Most of their credit card due dates fell between the 1st and 10th. My dad's car payment was set for the 5RD and the Stonebridge Club fees hit on the 6th. The goal was simple: create maximum inconvenience without causing lasting damage. On the night of the 30th, I logged into the credit card portal I had originally helped them set up using the password I knew they hadn't changed. Malcolm's birth year, company name, and an exclamation mark, exactly the same formula he'd used for years. I was immediately granted access, confirming it still worked. Instead of making direct changes, I used the official security tools offered by the credit card company. I enabled advanced security settings to enable additional security checks and temporary restrictions not canceled. I added security phrases to their credit profiles using their own information. I made slight adjustments to some of the verification answers to prompt manual review. It was enough to cause verification errors, but subtle enough not to raise alarms. Each action was intended to trigger temporary issues, not permanent harm. Their cards would be frozen while replacements were issued. Credit checks would now require more verification. Automatic payments would bounce because of the card holds. I set up notifications to my anonymous email so I could monitor the results. Then waited, caught between a sense of satisfaction and flickers of guilt. Was I becoming just as emotional influence? I tried to shake the thought, remembering my birthday, standing in the rain, packing my life into a car. The effects came faster than I expected. The next morning, I received a forwarded group message from my cousin, Chloe. My mom had messaged several relatives. We're having weird issues with our cards. Malcolm thinks it might be security concern. If you need to reach us, please call. We're dealing with the banks all day. That same afternoon, mutual friends started passing along updates. My mom had taken her garden club friends to an upscale restaurant. But when she tried to pay, her card was declined. Then the backup card failed too. She had to ask someone else to cover the bill, an embarrassment she wouldn't forget. My dad faced his own uncomfortable moment. At lunch with potential clients, his corporate card didn't go through. Brianna's mom heard from one of his assistants that he had to ask a junior team member to pay, promising to reimburse him later. Their confusion quickly turned to panic. My anonymous email account began receiving automated alerts. Attempts to reset passwords, change security questions, recover access. Each failed attempt triggered more layers of verification, which they couldn't pass because some contact details had been slightly altered. Malcolm even contacted support services, suspecting technical access issues. But nothing came of it. Everything had simply triggered standard account protections. The cards had simply been frozen due to routine verification steps. One auto-reply from a credit bureau said, "To unfreeze your accounts, please provide the required documentation. Processing will take 3 to 7 business days." The timing couldn't have been worse for them. On the 5RD, my dad's luxury car payment failed. That triggered a late fee and an automated notice from the leasing company. On the 6th, their Stonebridge Club payment bounced too, resulting in a message saying membership privileges were paused until payment was resolved. Through social media and word of mouth, I continued to track what happened next. I watched as the polished image my parents had built began to unravel. My mother canceled her weekly salon visit, claiming she had a scheduling conflict instead of admitting to any financial issues. My father pushed back client meetings, blaming so-called administrative problems at his firm. The financial disruption was starting to chip away at what they valued most, their social image. Denise's friends began whispering about money problems. Malcolm's business partners started questioning his stability, speculating whether his advisory firm was experiencing internal trouble. Neighbors noticed raised voices through open windows as the two of them blamed each other for what they called security mistakes. And all the while, they had no idea I was behind it. They truly believed they were dealing with unexpected system issues or account verification errors. Part of me took quiet satisfaction in watching their carefully controlled life descend into disarray. But another part of me was starting to feel strangely empty. Brianna noticed how often I checked for updates on their situation. "You're spending more energy tracking what's happening to them than on fixing your own life," she said gently one evening as I refreshed my inbox for the 10th time. She was right. My focus was split, and it was taking a toll. My grades were slipping. My job performance was suffering. I was constantly distracted and exhausted. What once felt like taking back control was now draining my energy. It was keeping me emotionally tied to the very people who had pushed me away. Yes, seeing them struggle had brought me some satisfaction, but it came with something I hadn't expected: guilt. Despite everything, they were still my parents. And when I overheard that the tension was starting to strain their marriage, with Denise saying she might stay with her sister until Malcolm handled the situation, I felt something tighten in my chest. What worried me most was recognizing the pattern. The detailed planning. The perfectly timed actions meant to create impact. The quiet emotional influence. I was using the same strategies my father had used throughout my childhood. Just in reverse. You look at that phone the same way your dad used to look at his spreadsheets, Brianna said one night. All focused and detached, like it's just numbers, not people. Her words hit hard. Was my frustration changing me into someone I didn't recognize? 2 weeks after I started my plan, I got news that should have been uplifting. I'd been approved for emergency student housing and offered a campus job that would help me manage essential expenses. Professor Hawthorne had even recommended me for a competitive summer internship that could open real doors for my future. These were the kinds of milestones I should have been celebrating. Steps toward a better life, despite everything my parents had done. But instead, I found myself more focused on the latest update about my dad's business situation than on my own progress. The realization was sobering. This emotional distance wasn't helping me heal. It was only stretching out the pain, keeping it fresh and lingering. The housing program placed me in a small studio in graduate housing available because someone had left mid-semester. It was barely larger than a dorm, but it gave me something I hadn't had in weeks. Stability. For the first time, I unpacked everything. No more crashing on couches or living out of bags. My new job in the university's design department gave me enough hours to handle basic needs. I helped create event flyers and promotional designs, projects that added to my portfolio while putting food on the table. The position had been created just for me. Professor Hawthorne had made sure of it. It was a quiet kindness that stood in sharp contrast to the treatment I'd received at home. Through the Horizon student housing, I started meeting other students with stories like mine. Evan had been pushed out after changing religious beliefs. Alina was working to support herself after leaving a difficult household. Their strength inspired me. Not just because they were surviving, but because they were focused on moving forward rather than looking back. At their encouragement, I visited the Ashwood Wellness Center. The first few times I hesitated. But after Brianna gently urged me again, I finally booked a session. Dr. Morales, a calm and patient woman, listened to everything I told her without judgment. What you experienced, she said gently, was a deep breach of trust. Your feelings are completely understandable. Then why does it feel worse the more I try to get back at them? I asked. Because you're still connected, she explained. Emotional distance keeps the relationship alive, it just changes the shape of it. You're still letting them take up space in your thoughts and emotions. Real freedom comes from letting go, not from reversing the roles. Her words struck something inside me. They made sense. But I wasn't ready to fully walk away, not yet. So I kept one foot in each world, monitoring my parents' situation while trying to rebuild my own. During a portfolio review, my professor, Dr. Ellison, offered another insight. After flipping through my latest work, he paused. Your technique is still excellent, he said slowly. But something's missing. These pieces feel flat. Like the emotion isn't there. I hadn't realized how my internal chaos was leaking into my creative process. I've had some personal stuff going on, I admitted. Art needs presence, he said. When you're caught up in past pain or future fear, your voice gets lost. You can't move forward fully until you let go of what's holding you back. That night, as I checked my anonymous inbox again for the latest financial updates on my parents, a classmate's offhand comment caught me off guard. You check that email more than Instagram, Naomi said as we worked on a group project. Must be something pretty serious. And just like that, I had a moment of clarity. I realized with startling clarity how much mental space my need to regain control still took up. While their lives had been temporarily shaken, mine had been deeply and permanently changed. Not just by their rejection, but by how I chose to respond to it. Eventually, they would fix the mess. They'd recover their status, their accounts, their image. But I was at risk of letting my entire future be defined by them. Even if it was through resistance instead of acceptance. That night, alone in my tiny apartment, I finally asked myself, do I keep fueling this? Or do I start letting go? I had a choice to make, keep dragging things out, deepening both their frustration and my emotional exhaustion. or shift that energy toward rebuilding the life I wanted. Toward my future, not their punishment. That decision became crystal clear when I received an email from the prestigious design firm Professor Hawthorne had referred me to. They invited me for an interview and portfolio review the following week. This opportunity had the potential to launch my career. But only if I showed up prepared and present, not distracted by old resentments. So I made my choice. Using the anonymous email I created earlier, I drafted a message with detailed instructions on how to unfreeze their accounts and reset security settings. It was all the information they'd need to regain full financial access. Without ever realizing I'd been involved, I scheduled the message to send in 2 days, making it look like it had come directly from their financial institutions. When I told Brianna what I'd done, she pulled me into a hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "This takes way more strength than continuing the emotional distance ever would." Letting go wasn't easy. Part of me still wanted them to feel the full weight of what they'd put me through, to really understand the impact of being pushed out like I didn't matter. But I had to face the truth. No amount of credit card headaches or block payments would ever help them grasp the emotional cost of their actions. Some lessons they were never going to learn. And accepting that was part of my own healing. With the decision behind me, I redirected my focus entirely. I applied for every scholarship available to independent students, eventually securing enough to pay for my final semester. I poured everything I had into my internship interview portfolio. When Dr. Ellison reviewed it, he said, "These are your most authentic designs yet." And then it happened. I got the internship. It came with valuable experience and a modest stipend, just enough to keep me afloat through the summer. After that, I found affordable off-campus housing with 2 other design students, locking in stability beyond the emergency housing window. 3 weeks later, I had my first peaceful birthday in years. Brianna organized a small surprise gathering with new friends from housing and work. No expensive gifts or flashy venues, just heartfelt laughter, chocolate cake, and people who saw and valued me for who I truly was. For the first time in a long time, I blew out candles surrounded by people who cared. Not for what I could do for them, but simply because I was me. That same night, I got an unexpected email from a gallery owner who had attended our Ashwood design exhibition. He wanted to feature 2 of my pieces in an upcoming exhibit for emerging artists. This opportunity didn't come from family influence or financial connections. It came from talent and effort being seen and recognized on their own terms. As spring faded into summer, I began feeling lighter, freer from the resentment that had driven me for so long. I still had hard days. I still grieved the family I thought I had. But I no longer saw myself only as the daughter who had been left out, or as the clever one who had fought back. I was becoming Lauren the designer, Lauren the friend, Lauren the survivor. My identity now stood on solid ground I had built myself, not on reactions to those who once doubted me. 1 year after I was pushed out on my birthday of all days, my life looked completely different. I graduated with honors despite every financial obstacle. And as I crossed the stage, I heard cheers not from family, but from Brianna and the new friends who had become my support system. No relatives were in the audience that day, but their absence didn't take anything away from the moment. By summer's end, the internship had turned into a junior designer position at a small but respected firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it provided a steady income and opened doors for real growth. Brianna and I shared an apartment with Naomi, and together we created a home. One filled with creativity, laughter, and mutual support. Financial literacy became one of my top priorities. I tracked every dollar, built an emergency fund, and started establishing credit in my own name. My relationship with money became intentional, not reactive. It was about security now, not status. Every so often, I'd still hear updates about my parents through mutual acquaintances, though I never sought them out. Eventually, they recovered from the disruptions I'd caused, blaming system errors and identity protection services, never suspecting me. Once things stabilized on their end, the messages started trickling in again. Sometimes they demanded reconciliation on their terms. Other times they leaned into guilt, reminding me of family duty. I kept responses short and neutral, only replying to direct communication. When Malcolm asked for the return of supposed family heirlooms, I simply stated that I'd only taken my own belongings when I left. When Denise suggested a fresh start without acknowledging any past hurt, I declined with polite clarity. My therapy sessions continued, but now they focus less on immediate survival and more on long-term healing. Dr. Morales helped me identify the harmful family dynamics I needed to avoid repeating, especially when it came to control and finances. Breaking patterns passed down through generations takes conscious work, she explained in one session. Awareness is just the beginning. It's the new behaviors that truly create lasting change. That awareness began shaping all my relationships. I paid closer attention to power dynamics, making sure I didn't fall into my father's patterns of control or mimic my mother's emotional pressure. I practiced honest communication, set healthy boundaries, and learned to express my needs clearly, skills that had been discouraged in my childhood. My social circle also started to grow beyond Brianna. I gravitated toward people who encouraged my growth instead of limiting it. Talia from the Horizon Student Housing became a close friend after we bonded over a shared love for photography and hiking. Mason, whose tech advice had played a key role in my early plans, became a confidant who truly understood what it felt like to be pushed out by family. What surprised me most was stepping into the role of a mentor. When the housing program director asked if I'd speak to a new student who had just been cut off by her parents, I didn't hesitate. Sharing my experience and practical strategies for surviving gave meaning to everything I'd gone through. Even connections with extended family needed careful rebalancing. My cousin Chloe reached out privately one day. She'd heard two very different versions of why I left. Aunt Denise's version didn't sit right, she admitted. I wanted to hear it from you. That conversation sparked a cautious reconnection, followed by other relatives reaching out with similar questions. These relationships were rebuilt slowly and on my terms, rooted in honesty and respect, not obligation or performance. As the one-year mark of my birthday eviction approached, Brianna had an idea. Let's celebrate, she said. Not out of pity but to take the day back. A freedom party. The gathering turned into something bigger than I expected. It became a turning point. A celebration of how far I'd come. Surrounded by friends who had become my chosen family, I realized that the birthday I once thought had shattered everything had actually been the beginning of something entirely new. I thought losing my parents' support would break me, I told the group that night. But instead, it forced me to discover strength I didn't even know I had. The most powerful lesson from that entire year? Realizing that their rejection reflected their own limitations, not my value. Their inability to love without conditions. To support my dreams. To see me as a person rather than a reflection of themselves. Those were their shortcomings, not mine. The emotional distance that once felt so satisfying turned out to be fleeting. Real healing didn't come from watching them struggle. It came from building a life they couldn't influence anymore. Every goal I reached through my own effort. Every friendship formed with sincerity. Every joyful moment lived on my own terms. Each became a building block in the life I was creating. I also learned something more complex. That kind of emotion can be both a spark and a weight. At first, it gave me momentum when everything felt hopeless. But over time, holding on to it would have slowly changed me, turning me into the very thing I had been trying to escape. On my 25 RD birthday, surrounded by chosen family in our cozy apartment, I made a wish before blowing out my candles. Not for them to feel pain, but for my own heart to stay open, to keep healing, to keep believing in joy, even after everything. Later that night, I wrote in my journal. 1 year ago, I thought my life was ending. Today, I see it was just beginning on my terms. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally didn't. But that didn't stop me from finding love elsewhere, from building a community, and from creating a life rooted in what I believe, not what they expected. The greatest emotional distance isn't making others suffer. It's refusing to let their actions define you. Have you ever experienced family rejection or financial control like Lauren did? How did you cope and what helped you heal? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content about overcoming family challenges and reclaiming your future. And remember, sometimes the family we build matters more than the one we're born into.